welcome. This is Don Bruins here with Raven Industries. Today I've got Scott Halls here with me. He's going to be covering our Pro Series controllers, or the Viper Pro and the Envizio Pro. We'll be talking the setup and settings and calibration numbers, and there'll be basically most of it will be related to dry applications since we're going into the fall season here. I guess at this point I will send it over to Scott.
My name is Scott Halls. I'm a technical support here at Raven Industries. So as Don said, we're going to cover the Viper Pro first. We're going to go over some settings. The machine setup we have today is more of just some generic air machine, but we're going to reference things as we go along, maybe to some spinner setups. After we get done with the Viper Pro, we'll do some quick few questions if anybody has any questions on the Viper Pro, and then we'll kind of roll into the Envizio Pro. So to kind of get started here, we're kind of taking the assumption here that maybe some of these Vipers maybe came out of another liquid machine, or possibly maybe they're combo units. So we want to make sure we go over all of our settings to make sure everything's set up correctly. Maybe one of the first things they're going to do is maybe load an existing profile that has been saved on the Viper. And even when we do that, we still want to make sure we verify that our boom setup is set up correctly when we switch profiles. Make sure everything transferred over before making any applications. So as you see on the screen there, we got a Viper Pro with the current release 310 software. It does have the new street maps available on there. If you guys aren't aware, about a couple years ago here, the old site we used to use had been retired because it was a free government site. So we do have a new link there for street maps that only works on the 310 4 versions and higher. So if you need any information on that, we have some articles out there on a public knowledge base you can refer to, or give us a call here and we can help you out with that. So the first thing we're going to take a look at is we're going to go on our Viper Pro, we're going to verify our boom setup. Make sure if we did the profile, everything did save correctly, and as you can see on the top of my screen, it does say my current profile, it's my air machine. But we're going to verify that boom setup. We're going to go menu, setup, and boom. First setting at the top, that's our left-right, is our GPS antenna located in the center of the machine. Most applications out there it's going to be, so we're going to have a 0. The fore aft on the Viper Pro, that's going to be the location of our application point to our rear axle. Or actually from our application point to our GPS antenna, excuse me. Most applications, our GPS is going to be ahead of our application point, so that's going to be a negative number on the Viper Pro. If you put a positive number in there, that's going to put that application point ahead of the machine or ahead of the GPS antenna, and can cause some issues with mapping and or AccuBoom control. Number sections, overall width. On this page here, this is our guidance setup. So this overall width entered here is the distance between your A-B lines. It does not necessarily have to be your total boom measurement. So if they want to cheat that guidance width a little bit to compensate for maybe some lost drift, just give them a little wiggle room, this is the location where you're going to change that. As we proceed here, you may get some, if you think numbers are changed, you may get some messages come up. Next page is just our boom widths. Our air machine, we got 2 equal sections, a 70-foot machine, so 420 inches each. Now, if you had a spinner machine, if you're controlling spinner speed, we still may set up 2 sections, but that number 2 section that's associated with our spinner does not necessarily have to be the full width. You can cheat that down so you can tell on your coverage map which one you're looking at. That's quite common. So they do not have to equal if it's a spinner setup. We just need to verify that we don't let the Viper Pro add them numbers together in a spinner setup to change our guidance width. So let's go ahead and hit next, and we're going to get to our boom setup page. This is a good indication to tell if our numbers are correctly, if that fore aft was entered as a negative number. If I entered that incorrectly as a positive number, you would see this boom at the top of the screen above the GPS antenna. So you can use that GPS antenna location to verify that I'd entered the correct measurements. Now, if we had a spinner machine, we don't want to have our sections laid next to each other. We want to lay them on top of each other. So we would have to manually change our left-right so they both equal 0 under the left-right column. And we can do that by touching on where it says boom 1 on the lower part of the page and manually change our left-right to 0 for a spinner. And then next to section 2 and enter a left-right of 0 for that section as well. But today, since we're setting up an air machine, we're going to leave it our left-rights as a Viper Pro had calculated. we'll leave our wired as section 1 and section 2. The Viper Pro does allow you to change the display character, and this is what you're going to see on the screen. So if you want to change that to something other than 1 or 2, maybe to a left and right like I have here, you can go into Map Booms and change this display character. The Viper Pro, however, does limit you to what you can use for characters there. So once we get our boom setup all verified, let's go ahead and hit OK, and that'll take us back to our run screen. From there, I like to move right into product control. Down there we got our thumbs up, verify all of our settings are correctly there, our node settings. The first thing I like to do is go down to the bottom right corner where it says application, make sure our application is set correctly. For node 1, we're set to Grand 1, PWM close valve. If we had multiple nodes on here, we can select from the drop-down box and verify that node 2 or product 2 is set correctly as well. If you have a spinner machine and you're controlling spinner speed, of course you're going to have to change that or verify that it is set to spinner and the correct valve type. Once we verify our application type, I like to move up to the top left corner where our boom counts are and verify that our correct boom sections are associated with the correct product. My air machine here today, I'm going to have both booms 1 and 2 associated with product 1 and 2, so I'm going to have everything checked. If this was a spinner, you may see something on your screen like this. We're going to associate boom 1 with product 1 and boom 2 with product 2. I'm going to reselect these for my air machine today and hit OK. Once we get that set up, I like to go up to the miscellaneous. That's where we can set our speed cal, we can set our AccuBoom settings, audible alarm. One thing I want to talk about on this page, if you may not have noticed in the later Viper Pro versions, there's a boom capacity. That can either be toggled on or off. And then there's also the pound listing in a max capacity. The function of this boom capacity is a lot of your granular machines at some point you can outrun basically your application rate. You can maybe either outrun how fast that product can be fed to the distribution system, or you can plug a machine or get it to a point where maybe the pattern is not to where it should be, it gets distorted. So this is a visual alarm that we can set in pounds per minute, volume per minute, and it'll give you a graph to allow the operator to see where he's operating within that range. This is really valuable when you start doing variable rate and you start seeing different rate zone changes. It gives the operator a visual on his screen to when he's exceeding what his machine can apply, so he can slow down to keep that within where he needs to be. So I'm going to hit OK. From there, I like just to work down to the center section of the screen, and you got to do these settings for both node 1 and 2. But I like to verify what my alarm settings are in the top portion there. We got our dual flow percent. If we're running in Grand 1 or spinner, dual flow percent, that number doesn't do anything. That is only utilized in a granular system when we're set to Grand 3, when we got the dual encoders, and that's a value of the check between the two encoders. Because when both booms are on, we only read off one encoder, then we check the other encoder. Certain OEMs may provide you with a different number than 50%. 50% is just the default number. Below that, your off rate percent is going to default to 30%. That's where your off rate alarm is going to come on, where it's going to warn you. Another one to keep an eye on is ratio rate. It allows us to enable that. There's no circumstance in any dry machine where that should be turned on. Ratio rate's a feature for mainly injection and roadside applications. If that gets enabled, you're going to have issues achieving rate. Hit target, you may not get alarms, you're going to have some goofy things happen. So that's one thing to check. If you get some rate issues where things just don't make sense, take a look and make sure ratio rate is off. If we got multiple products where we have vent level sensors, we want to make sure our back vent alarm is toggled on. Lower half the screen, that's get us into our node settings. We can set a rate cal, a rate plus and minus. We can set our density and our spreader constant from this first page. There's also calibration assistance for the spreader constant, which we can't show you here today with our demo, but that's going to help for doing your catch test to determine what your correct spreader cal is. If we hit next, we can set our valve cal. Some of your machines out there may have a valve cal 2, depends on the type of application. If we're monitoring spinner speed or fan speed, we can enter our fan cal here. Keep in mind on your spinner machines, if you're controlling spinner speed, make sure this value is 0 for all your nodes. You will have issues with your spinner speed if you enter a fan cal here. If we have a PWM valve on our machine, we'll want to verify our min PW and our max PW. Basically what our min is a floor for our PWM valve. Where does that shut off? Where does that belt quit moving? And the max is just a number. 253 is the highest we can use. Where is that maximum setting we need to run that PWM valve at? That can default to 253, or you may run that lower, depends on your application. There's also some manual and auto calibration numbers, auto calibration procedures there you can go through to set them values to let the Viper determine where them values should be. If we hit next, preset PW, that's a number that we utilize in granular systems quite frequently when we have a PWM valve. What this number here is it's going to be above your minimum, and when the user shuts off in the headlands and being reset to PWM close, that value goes to 0. So when we're coming back out of the headlands, when the master switch is turned back on or AccuBoom turns back on, this is the first place the valve returns to. Then adjust from there. So this allows you to get to rate quicker or hit that target rate a lot faster. This number may need to be tuned from time to time. Depends on what your target rate is and the speeds that are coming in and out of the headlands. If you have this number too high and you have a lower rate, you may way over apply and then have to adjust from there, or if it's too low, you have to start there and then the valve has to catch up to get to that rate. So sometimes the user has to tune that depending on what types of rates he's applying. The PW frequency, that's just a coil frequency. Raven defaults to 122. Depends on your manufacturer of your valve. There may be a different number that you may need to put in here. There's one other thing I want to show you here. If we go to the alarm setting, and I touch on that section of the screen where we can toggle through our alarms, we get to this last page where we can check back vent alarm, zero speed shutoff. The newer hardware nodes, you're also going to see an option for smart control. What the smart control is when we're using a PWM valve and we go through the auto calibration for our PWM valve, the system's going to predetermine a set of presets for that preset PW. And what this allows you to do, especially in variable rate, is it allows the system to determine where that valve position should be when it's coming in and out of the headlands automatically. So the user may not have to tune that preset PW on his own. That you can allow the field computer to handle that for you. So that's just kind of a brief overview of what you should kind of look at here on the product control setup. So at that point there, if everything else hasn't changed, we're probably ready to apply, but we're going to take a look at a couple other settings you might want to verify. If we go down to menu, and we go back to setup, we might have to go to COM ports. If we're not don't have that GPS thumbs up on our home screen, we can get into here and we can do our auto baud. Maybe this machine's been moved, different GPS receiver, smart tracks, so we can go out there and look for that baud rate for our GPS communication. Another one you might have to look at, especially if you may or may not have a external light bar, we can go back to the same place, menu, setup, and light bar. If the user wants to utilize the on-screen light bar and or an external light bar, and if we have smart tracks, we want to make sure we have send guidance message checked, so we can send that guidance line back to our smart tracks. The next one we want to look at, once we got our machine set up, we verified all of our settings, maybe this is a new machine, we might want to go in and save that profile. So we have that set up, our boom set up. If we want to change anything later or easily reload profiles, if we got spinner machines, we got different spread widths possibly where we can easily change between different spread widths by utilizing the profiles. And that there is found in menu, setup, local, profile. Then we can either load or save a profile from this point. One other thing I want to show you here in the same location, with 310 software, if you've experienced it, we did change up our alarm box a little bit. It is a little bigger and it does behave a little bit different. We can talk a little more about that later. But we also have in 310.4, you also have the ability to move that alarm box or display data from the bottom of the screen here to the top of the screen. And that can be done by going into menu, setup, local, and then units, and putting a check in the shift data display. And that'll move our alarm box, our tally registers, everything to the top of the screen. And hopefully that may be a little more out of the guidance view as we're applying through the field. If we're doing variable rate mapping, you have to maybe verify our look ahead settings. So menu, setup, maps, and we can go RX maps, and then look ahead. Now this is a setting in time, how far the Viper Pro is looking ahead to change to that next variable rate zone, to allow the machine to adjust so we can get to that rate quicker for that next zone. Alright, so from there, we're just going to jump into, before we get into starting a job, we're going to talk about some file maintenance, because we're going to bring in a variable rate map prior to starting a job so we can open a VRA job. So we're going to go Menu, File Maintenance, and we're going to have a whole bunch of selections here. First time you ever use this USB drive for the Viper Pro, you're going to have to get it first initialized external USB drive. That's going to create the file structure on that USB drive. From there, we can do, if we got our RX maps, we can do a USB RX map upload, and what that option will do is move everything within that RX maps folder on your USB drive over to the Viper. If the variable rate maps are not in the RX maps folder, they will not copy, of course, so the user may have to come into the USB file transfer option, select on his RX map, copy, we're going to do USB drive to Viper, and we're going to select copy selected. Once we hit next, you're going to be able to see right into what's in that RX maps folder on that Viper Pro. If there's contents in there, they'll show up on the screen, but as like mine here, I deliberately made a mistake and didn't put them in my RX maps folder, and I'm going to show you how to find them if they're on your USB drive. So if we go up to the top left corner, we got a little folder with an up arrow, and that's going to take us up a level in our USB drive folder structure. So I can see the rest of them folders on my USB drive. So I can go into each individual folder and see if I can find my RX maps. I'm going to go up another level into my Viper folder, and I can see the two folders that were created. If I go up to the root directory, I can see my RDE folder for my slingshot jobs, RX maps, and Viper. Now this RX maps folder is in the wrong spot, so I can open it up, and I can see all the files that I had copied over to my USB drive and put in the wrong spot. So this will allow the user to copy each individual file, or we can also just copy the whole folder. Select the folder, select copy, and that'll copy the complete contents of that folder, including the folder, over to the Viper Pro. The only time this procedure wouldn't work is if they put the shape files, the raw shape files, on the root of the USB drive and they weren't in a folder. That would require us to either go into XP Desktop or back to the computer and put them in a folder. While we're into the file maintenance, we're going to talk about a couple other file types, things that kind of trip people up. Viper Pro, we have different file types that we can export. We can either get our slingshot job files, or we can just get a simple bitmap and shape files. If we want them slingshot job files, we need to make sure we select on job and export, and then we can either do export selected or export all. If we do a copy or move function, that's just going to get raw job files from the Viper Pro that are not usable in Viper Pro. So we need to make sure we select on export. If you want the simple bitmap and or shape file, you can select on report and then copy, move, delete, whatever we want to do to move that file. Occasionally, you're going to have to perform some file maintenance on your Viper Pro. We're going to have to get them old jobs off, even if we're using Slingshot, raw job files always stay on the Viper Pro until deleted. We can select on job, delete from Viper, and then we're going to have some associated actions we can do with that. We can delete the AccuBoom file, delete the RX map, or we can select prompt that'll ask us what we want to do, and we can either do by age, all, or delete selected. I'm just going to select all, hit next, acknowledge the warning. But what you're going to get is you'd get an option there. If you have a variable rate map, it's going to give you an option there to either leave the RX map on the Viper or delete it along with the job file. As you see here, it's going to ask me if I want to delete that RX map. Today I do not want to. And of course, if we're working with any other file type, we can do that from this screen as well. The other options for file maintenance is there's also an automatic file maintenance. This option can work good to get the report to your USB drive by using this option. Automatically moves that job over to the USB drive with the reporting information and deletes it from the Viper. However, if you do the automatic file maintenance without a USB drive, the Viper is going to be telling you that it's deleting the job, which it does. However, it continues to hold the report information on the Viper Pro storage. So after enough times of doing that, sooner or later you're going to probably find that you run out of memory because we're storing all them extra jobs on, or the reports on there, and not deleting them off. So if that's the case, you can come back into RX or USB file transfer and just delete the reports off. Alright, so enough on file maintenance. We're going to jump right into starting the job and going over a few things there. So we're going to go menu, start job, and new job. Top box there is going to allow us to name this job for identification later. Most important though, we got to make sure we got our correct options selected. Product application, if we want guidance on the Viper, we're going to have swath guidance enabled and AccuBoom control enabled. A lot of times we get a question is, once I open a job I don't have guidance or I don't have product control. What can happen here when a user goes to change the name? If they might inadvertently brush their finger on the word application, it's going to take that check out of product application, and we open that job and we don't have that feature available. So we want to make sure before we hit the next button that all of our checks are correct. Then we can select a guidance pattern in AccuBoom, or we're going to default to standard AccuBoom. If we're using creating AccuBoom maps, we can either create it from field boundary, or we can create a map where we can create that no apply zone outside of our field boundary so our product application does not turn on. We're going to hit next. How many nodes are we going to be applying? And this number should always equal the number of nodes you have on your system. If we're not going to use a product, we can once the job is open, we just leave that product off. How many chains will we be using? This is for bin chaining. If we want to link them two nodes that I have today, if we want to link them together to do one application, run one bin out, then a second bin. I'm going to select one today to show you how that works. If you're not doing bin chaining, you're just going to leave this value at 0. And once to set up the bin chain, we can select which nodes we're going to chain together. So if you got more than 2 nodes, you may have multiple checks. The numbers on the right hand is what order do you want them bins to run in. I want bin 1 to run second, and I'm going to run node 2 first. So I'm going to empty my back bin first in this case. You can set that order however you'd like. We're going to hit next. What's going to be our advanced method? We're going to auto advance, and I'm going to auto advance on bin sensor alarm. Okay, once we get into our product setup, since we got a chain, we're only going to do one product basically. So we're going to select our product name, the boom selection, make sure it says all. For our air machine, if we're doing a spinner, we're only probably going to have boom 1. I'm going to select on VRC, and I'm going to load my variable rate map that we previously copied over. I'm going to go down to Browse, go into that RX Maps folder I copied over, and select which RX map I'm going to use, and hit OK. Now in the bottom box, we're going to have some options. Now this is the rate column in your DBF file. If they're created with multiple columns, you might have urea, you might have DAP, lime, whatever. There could be multiple choices. So the user does have to touch and highlight the correct rate column within that file. We're going to do potash with this one. We're going to hit next, and we're going to get a rate conversion when we're doing variable rate mapping. This is should default to 1.0. That means we're going to apply 100% of what that map is made in. Where this value is handy is if you're doing possibly lime recommendations where the user that made the map may have made it in tons, and since our system applies in pounds, we need to convert that value. So in that case there, if we get a map made in tons, we need to enter a conversion factor of 2,000. We're going to multiply everything times 2,000 to make that map into tons so we can apply it. But for today, we're going to leave it at 1.0, hit next. Then we're going to have a default value. This is a number of what you can set if you need to apply outside your RX map. Maybe there's the map is created in imagery, and we got a gap on one side of the field that we're off our map, but we need to apply. Or maybe the field is a little bigger on one side than the map was originally created. Maybe they moved the fence line, or getting into another field or part of the field that doesn't have an RX map. You can put a default rate on here in pounds per acre. This value can also be changed once the job is open. So we're going to open this job up. We're going to get an AccuBoom warning. We're going to hit open now, and we're going to open up to our guidance tab. Our guidance tab, that's just basically what it says. That's our guidance. Where are we going to set our guidance lines? When we open that job, if we didn't check guidance, the guidance tab will be grayed out and you won't be able to use it. If we go to the RX coverage and scout, hit the extends arrow next to the DD and below the screen. That's going to pull our RX map and our coverage map all into view. Right below that, if we go into RX, then we have an option. We can go down below our screen there. We can see our target area. That's how many acres are within this map. We can select on the prescription beaker, and when we touch within the map, it's going to tell you what the value is for that rate zone. It's an easy way for an operator to see what kind of rate ranges he's going to have to apply. We had the question, can you do bin chaining without a variable rate job? Yes, we can. We can do that at standard rate, just like you would instead of loading a variable rate map. You're just going to go into application rate, lower right corner, and you're going to have, just as we see here, you're going to have only one product show up because we chain the two I have together, and you can enter your rates just like you normally would a regular job. Coverage maps, only going to show you coverage, and Scout, that's the tab we're going to use to create field boundaries. We're not going to get into creating the boundaries and creating the AccuBoom zones today due to time, but if you do have any questions, we do got a couple articles out on our public knowledge base, or you can give us a call and we can answer any questions you have on that. Okay, so earlier on we talked about our boom capacity. This is where you're going to see that. If you touch on your display data, we're going to open up our tally registers. If you go up to the screen where your tally registers are and you touch on it, you can toggle through your areas and volume settings. For bend chaining, you get a chain info. You can see the volume, the sequence, which one's active, how many acres have been applied within this chain, our alarm box, and then our boom capacity. My boom capacity I get set at 1,000 pounds a minute. So as we apply, and of course I'm going to get off rate, and here I'll show you that here. Well, since that popped up, come back to boom capacity, but you see our alarm box there come up with my off rate alarm. Sorry to jump around here, but so we display the active alarms there. Now, in a normal application, if I would have got into my zone there, I would have hit my rate, product 2 off rate would have went away, but this alarm box would have remained open. There's been a lot of confusion with that, so a little bit about the behavior here. So we're going to display your current alarms in there, and that's going to stay open unless the user comes down to the bell, which used to be our display data, when that alarm is active, and acknowledge it. So if I touch on the bell, the alarm box closes because we acknowledge the alarm, but since I'm still off rate, it continues to flash. If that alarm comes back a second time, since I acknowledged it the first time and it's still it's the same alarm I acknowledged, we just get the active bell and the alarm box does not open. Now if I get a new alarm, bend chain, or some other system alarm comes up, that alarm box will reopen to show us that there's a new alarm that we have not previously acknowledged. Okay, so as we're running through the field, this is what the operator is going to see if he's utilizing the boom capacity. You're going to see the percentage of where you are in your application rate to that value that had been entered for our max capacity. It's going to be a bar graph to kind of notify them to where they're at. You'll see that green line change as that value changes. So if we're bend chaining, we don't run the bend chain in a circle. So when my bend 2 goes empty, I already said it auto advance, so it's going to automatically advance to bend 1. And once bend 1 goes empty, the system is going to shut down. We're not going to revert back to bend 2 to that original order. It's going to notify it. See down there that your applied rate, it set it to off. So when the user goes back, he's going to go back to the truck, going to reload. We need to reset that chain order. So we're going to go down to the application rates, select on the chain icon. Nope, that's where we set our product densities, excuse me. Right below there, it's active. It tells us our active bend is 1 because that's the last one we used. And we're going to change it back to number 2, which was our original order. So this is whatever was the order was, you're going to see that on the screen. You got to reset it back to the original order. Otherwise, it would just apply the last bend in the chain and then shut down. It would not automatically switch back to that first bend. The other option you have, which is new in the newer Viper Pro versions, is we also, once both our bend sensors have been seen with both our advanced methods, we have the option now for a clean out. What this allows the user to do, we can put a check in there. And what we're going to do, since we got a 2-bend system, and I got a 300-pound target rate, it's going to apply 150 pounds out of each bend at the same time to allow that user to empty the bend out without reopening a new job, because our bend alarm is going to keep shutting that off. So we can just allow, or go into manual. So that'll allow the user to empty that bend, both his bends out, once his field is complete, or at any time he needs to during that job. All right, Envizio Pro. So same thing, we're going to kind of just go over what we should look at for initial settings. Some of it's going to be a repeat to what we did for the Viper Pro. Envizio Pro does not have all the bend chaining functionality that we have with the Viper, so that's a manual process. Envizio Pro, instead of doing an air machine setup, we're going to do a spinner machine setup this time. All right, so the first thing we're going to do, we're going to go into tools. We can, if this has been moved from other machines, we want a control interface. Make sure we're set to can sprayer spreader control. 2 ways you can go through your settings. We can either manually go through one at a time, go through guidance with offsets, sections, then product control, or we can utilize the wizard in the upper left corner. And that's kind of the wizard is a good way to do it, because it's going to force the user to go through and verify all the settings for all the products. But first thing before you do that, you'd want to set your guidance with, because that's one thing the wizard does not do, and enter your offsets. These are your machine measurements. Where's our GPS located on the machine? I'm going to do self-propelled or mounted. our fore aft, that's from our application point to our GPS location. For some reason, if you have your implement or your application is in front of your GPS antenna, you're going to check implement in front. Or if your GPS is not in the center of the machine, if it's left to center, we need to check left to center. Otherwise, the value that's entered in the left-right will automatically be applied to the right of the machine. And we can also enter antenna height. From there, I'm going to go up to the wizard, do my product section setup wizard first. I'm going to do 2 sections for my spinner. I'm going to do 1 for my bell and 1 for my spinner. Enter my section 1 width and section 2. That's going to be, you can be the same as your section 1 width, or can be narrower so we can see the difference in our coverage maps. I'm just going to do 80 inches, make it narrower. And now it's going to give us a warning. Our total width for our sections doesn't match our guidance width, and that's correct. Because we got 2 sections, we're going to overlay them on top of each other, so we're not going to equal what our guidance width is. Just a warning. Now, if I had a boom sprayer, either an air machine or a liquid machine, I can hit on auto configure, and it's going to automatically line them sections left to right. But since we're doing a spinner, I'm going to have to manually configure my boom setup. It's going to give us section 1 first. Bottom part of the screen is going to give us a visual where how our sections are laid out and location to the GPS antenna. So we're seeing it behind the GPS antenna as it's at the bottom of the screen. For spinner, we're going to make sure our left-right is 0, and our fore-aft is what we've entered in on the vehicle setup. Same for section 2, we're going to have that left-right to 0, so 1 and 2 are laid on top of each other. If I change that value, you're going to see that shift. So you can see that bottom of the screen where that is located in respective to where on the machine. So we're going to make sure that's set to 0. Both them sections are on top of each other. Once we're complete there, we're going to hit the green check and proceed into the product control setup wizard. It's going to walk us through our speed cal, verify that our speed is set up correct. I'm going to set radar, and you can see we're going to have a little tab. We've got multiple products. You're going to see which product you're working on in the upper right corner, and we can select our application type for product 1, granular 1, single belt, single encoder for our spinner box, set our valve type and our valve cal, enter our product density, our weight per cubic foot, our initial rate cal. Now all these numbers have to be non-zero. They can always be changed later. And then we're going to enter our spreader constant. And last, it's going to come to our section assignment page. Since I have a spinner, I'm going to assign product 1 to boom 1, and then hit the arrow to the right. Now you see it switches to product 2. This is my second bend, or my coap bend on my spinner. Single belt, single encoder. I'm set for fast valve. Check my valve cal. Go through my density, initial rate cal, spreader constant, and make sure my product 2 is associated with boom 1. Now product 3, that's going to be my spinner, so I'm going to select spinner for application type. This machine here, we're going to do a PWM valve for our spinner, valve cal 43. Now some of these valve cal numbers, if you have some of your OEM boxes, may provide you a little bit different numbers or some initial recommendations. Go ahead and use them. A lot of the OEMs have done testing and have a good idea where some initial these numbers should be. We can do our modify PWM settings here. We can manually change our PWM settings with manual, or we can go through the auto calibration. Let the Envizio Pro, let the system determine where them values should be. And then we're going to enter our spinner cal. Now when we're controlling spinner speed, we're going to take the number of points that sensor is reading off of, which is usually a bolt on the bottom of the spinner, multiply it times 10. Most commonly you're going to have 4 points you're reading off of, so we're going to enter a spinner cal of 40. This is a little different than when we're just monitoring spinner speed. When we're monitoring spinner speed, then we're going to enter a fan cal of the number of points we're reading off of, which would be 4, and that would be entered under product 1. So same rule applies with the Viper Pro. If we're controlling spinner speed, never enter a fan cal. And then the RPM cal, of course, that's going to be our spinner speed, our target spinner speed when we're controlling spinner speed. And then we're going to assign our spinner product 3 to boom 2. Alright, so that kind of gets our product setting set up. We can do the same thing. We can utilize profiles with the Envizio Pro, so we can either load saved profiles, create new ones, overwrite my existing if I hit save, but I'm just going to create a new one. I'm going to touch the paper, identify it, and it's saved to my profile list. Now, keep in mind, profiles only apply to guidance and boom configuration. None of your product control settings are saved in a profile. So if they're switching from liquid to granular with the same unit, combo machine, pull type implements where we're switching back and forth, they manually have to go through the product control settings or the wizard to make sure that the product is set up correctly. Alright, a couple other things we should look at. Let's go into product control manually. If we're using AccuBoom, check your AccuBoom settings, make sure they're set up correctly. Even though we're probably not using AccuBoom to control that spinner, there's going to be an option here, and when we get into a job, I'll show you how to avoid having AccuBoom control that spinner. The other thing we want to look at is alarm settings. If we're using vent alarm, we want to make sure we got vent alarm checked for vent sensor. And you can also see from the product control settings, we have all the snapshot of all of our other settings that walked us through the wizard, plus a few other settings that we may have to verify. Okay, so from here, same thing, we're going to do some RX maps. For doing RX maps, we have to get them moved over. We got to do file maintenance once in a while, so we're going to touch on that quick. My demo here isn't going to quite let us show everything that we want to, but we're just going to talk about it here quick. So we go to file maintenance. We have at the top right corner, we have our initialized USB drive to create that file structure. And what else is new here is we have a USB wrench. This is for exporting job files, and this is new in 3.10 software for the ePro that's currently listed on the website as beta. What we can do is we can enable what reports do we want to export. This basically, by not having the file types that we're not going to use not selected, it might free up a little memory because we're not saving all that information. But by default, you probably have all three of these checked. Bottom of the screen, we got files out from the Envizio Pro and then files into the Envizio Pro. So if we do the file in, which it won't let me do, and if we're trying to do our RX maps, bring our RX maps in. Unlike the Viper Pro where we could search for that folder on our USB drive, we don't have that option with the Envizio Pro. It's very important that our three shape files, our DBF, SHP, and SHX files, are placed in the RX maps folder, otherwise we cannot find them. If we get them in the wrong location, it's going to require a computer to go in there and manually move them files. We don't have any way to search on the Envizio Pro. So files going out, we can export our Pro files, save them, AB files, and job files. So here's a bunch of my saved job files. We can either select an individual file. We can, as in the bottom two options in the left corner, that's going to save our bitmap and shapefile to our USB drive. We can either do all the files or one file. The frog option, that's for Slingshot. Are we going to send all of our job files to Slingshot or individual file? And that's going to take the file to the USB drive to be used on the Slingshot website. It's not going to automatically send them to Slingshot if we have it. That would be the third option. If we select on the third option there, which I have my arrow on, that would allow you to manually send a single file via Slingshot if maybe we didn't send it at the close of a job or something happened where we didn't have connectivity at a time. That'll allow you to resend that file. The two options on the far right, that's either delete all of our files or delete an individual file. Okay, so that kind of covers file maintenance. You're going to move into some a couple other items here. Down at the bottom, if you got internal GPS on your Envizio Pro, we got a source icon. We got to make sure that's either set to internal if we're only using internal GPS, external if we're using Phoenix 300, 600S, Phoenix 200, or if we have smart tracks or tilt sensor, we got to make sure we're set to internal via tilt or smart tracks if the Envizio Pro has internal GPS. Anytime we're using an external GPS source, it's always going to be set to external, even if we have smart tracks. Another new feature we have is if we go up to the GPS at the top of the screen, we have an option for drift shift, and this came about in the last couple versions. What this allows you to do, if it's enabled, it's going to be default disabled, is we can set some shift increments of user set, or we can use the defaults. And what this allows you to do within a job, if you're using variable rate maps or return to a previous applied area, if your coverage is shifted or your map is shifted due to GPS drift, or like the RX map has that shift because it was made in imagery and it wasn't quite done right, this will allow you to shift that RX map coverage guidance lines on your screen back to your physical location, or to where they should be. And I'll show you that once we get into a job. Alright, so that's kind of pretty much what things we need to look at before we start a job. So let's just jump right into starting a job. So when we go to the play, at the top there we got our job icon, or our tab at the left. We can open existing job. We can hit the paper if we want to use a name other than our default. Otherwise it's just going to do the date and time. If we're doing section control, we want to make sure it's enabled. If we want to do them no spray zones, we got to make sure enable zones that map is checked, which is probably more common on a liquid machine. And then at the bottom of the screen we got our products. Product 3, 2, and 1 all in automatic. No rates. If we're going to load a VRA map, we have the prescription icon at the right side of the product, so we can touch on that. select our map that I already preloaded. We have our rate conversion option at the bottom for that map made in tons. And just like our Viper Pro, we still have to select which rate column we're going to read out of that file. So now, my name has my VRA map loaded in there. Now if I want to change what the name of that product is, which I have already named from my last job, product 1 is my front bend, product 2 is back, and I named product 3 spinner, we can touch on the product name, make sure it's enabled, set to automatic, manual, or off, and we can go in and change this product name. And this is what you're going to see within a job, how that to identify that product. Also for your reporting. Enter a rate. Alright, so everything's set up for my product here. I'm going to do product 1 is a VRA map, product 2 is a straight rate. Unlike the Viper Pro, we cannot do bend chaining with the Envizio Pro, so if they're running the same product, the user manually has to switch products as he goes, or switches bends. You got the tractor icon in the upper right. That's our reverse detection. Which direction are we traveling? Gives the user an idea what's he going to see when he's in the job. Does the Envizio Pro think we're going backwards or are we going forward? So my direction is currently set correctly, so we're just going to open the job. So the first thing we want to look at is in the lower left corner. If you don't have a switch box like a CAN switch box or a switch pro, you're going to have this AccuBoom icon in the lower left corner. Blue is AccuBoom enabled, red is override off, green is override on. So in this case here where I have a spinner that I do not want AccuBoom to control, I'm going to touch on number 1, put it to AccuBoom, and leave my spinner product number 2 to green, override on, so that spinner runs all the time. Alright, then if we go switch our view to overhead, or airplane view, we can see our whole complete coverage map, or RX map, and all of our coverage. Lower right corner here is going to show us our RX rate as we switch into zones. And you can see on the center of the screen there, there's an X in the center of the screen. That's where I originally opened this job up with, and that's for that drift shift feature that we have. So if my map isn't correct, I can go over here to my menu, a green menu in the lower right corner, go to this satellite shift. But you're going to have these arrows on your screen, and you'd be normally sitting still doing this. And you can pan that map, or that coverage map, everything on the screen that you have on the screen to a different location. Once you're complete, hit the green check or the red X to cancel, and you'll go back to your regular view. Another new feature we have, I'm going to go back to my downfield view, is our guidance patterns with 310 software, which is still listed under the beta on the ravenhelp.com. We have a new guidance pattern. We'll call this as last pass 2. So we still have our original last pass pattern, but last pass 2 is kind of an enhancement to that. How last pass normally works is it only recorded your guidance when you're applying. So when you got into that previously applied area, it wasn't recording anything. So what last pass 2 does for us is when we get into that headlands or that previously applied area and we're going to turn around, it's going to give us an extended A-B line. It's going to be real helpful for maybe some row spraying. The user will have that ability to maybe pick that line up quicker because it's going to be extended. It's going to give us an extended based on the heading. You also have a little icon here for the last pass 2. For some reason, if when they turned around, it maybe gave them the headlands pass and not the next pass, they can touch on that, and the Envizio Pro will look for a second option for the line. If we want to, from our job screen, want to change any product control settings, we can touch on our rate box in the upper right corner, touch and hold on it. We can change our product from off, manual to automatic if we didn't do that when we started the job. We can see our area per hour, volume per minute, enable on-screen rate bump buttons if we don't have for the rate bump. Then if we hit the arrow to the right, we can get back into our product control settings. So maybe we have to change one of our settings, our density, spreader constant, anything like that. We can get back in here and change that within a job. A couple other things we can do, if we go back into the menu, we also have a flag. So the user can drop a flag to mark something, maybe where he left off for the day. That's kind of handy if you're maybe using that drift shift or if they want to mark a feature within the field. There's also a nudge. So that's for our guidance if we're using straight A-B, if we need to nudge that line left or right due to GPS drift. So we can enable it, set what that value is. So once we have our A-B line set on the screen, then we have these nudge buttons show up once that's enabled. So we can nudge that line one way or the other. If we want to utilize field boundaries or zones, if we go to menu, the black icon is going to get us into our field boundary record, or we can load an existing boundary. Once we do that, if we do create a field boundary around our field and we border it, we can see from the field review screen, it would in this upper white box in the upper left corner, that's going to display us area within the boundary, so we can see how many acres are in that zone. With the demo here today, we won't be able to, oh, there we go. I guess in that little triangle there I had when I stopped, I got 4.8 acres within my boundary. For the review, you got your product button at the bottom, so you can toggle between which coverage map you're looking at.